This is the only way, Evelyn.
I see that now, Sebastian.
By the time the black carriage bearing the Ashford crest appeared, at the end of the drive, Duchess Evelyn Ashford had already been standing at the front window for nearly 20 minutes. She had been informed that her husband would return before dusk, but Sebastian had never been a man who arrived when expected. During the first years of their marriage, Evelyn had waited for him with impatience. Later, she had learned to wait without hope. Outside, a cold autumn wind swept across the lawns and sent the last copper leaves tumbling over the stone steps. Inside Ashford Manor, the servants stood in two quiet rows beneath the portraits of Sebastian's ancestors. The hall had been prepared with fresh flowers, polished silver, and a fire large enough to warm a house that had felt empty for months. Evelyn descended the staircase just as the carriage stopped. Sebastian stepped out first. He looked much as he had when he left for London 6 weeks earlier, tall, composed, and dressed with the effortless elegance expected of the Duke of Ashford. Yet something in his expression had changed. His eyes moved over the manor as though he were returning not to his home but to a place he had already decided to leave behind. Then he turned and offered his hand to the woman. Inside the carriage, Lady Victoria Sinclair emerged in deep blue velvet, one gloved hand resting lightly in his. She was beautiful in the careful, polished manner of women who understood exactly how long to hold another's gaze. Her smile was warm enough to seem gracious, though not warm enough to imply uncertainty. Behind her, a footman began unloading several trunks. Evelyn noticed them before anyone spoke. Not even a single suitcase for a short trip. 6 large trunks, a hatbox, and a lacquered chest. Marked with Victoria's initials, Sebastian crossed the hall toward his wife. "Evelyn, Your Grace." His gaze sharpened at the formal greeting, but she offered him the same calm courtesy she would have shown any guest. Lady Victoria stepped forward. "Duchess, you are very kind to receive me with so little notice. The servants. We were informed that His Grace would not be traveling alone." There was no accusation in Evelyn's voice. That seemed to unsettle Sebastian more than anger would have. Victoria glanced around the entrance hall. "Ashford Manor is even lovelier than I remembered. Have you visited before?" Evelyn asked. "Many years ago," Sebastian answered too quickly. "Her family attended one of my mother's winter gatherings." Evelyn looked at him. Of course, for the next 2 hours, no one mentioned the trunks. Dinner was served in the smaller dining room, though the table still seemed too large for 3 people. Sebastian talked about the London Parliament and the weather during his trip. Victoria added occasional observations, each one measured and pleasant. Evelyn listened, asked what politeness required, and ate almost nothing. She didn't ask why Victoria had come. She already knew. The confirmation arrived after the servants left. Sebastian stayed standing by the fireplace while Victoria walked over to the window, giving the married couple the appearance about privacy without actually leaving them alone. "There's something we need to discuss," Sebastian said. Evelyn folded her hands in her lap. "I assumed there was." He hesitated. Perhaps he had expected confusion. Perhaps even tears. Instead, her stillness forced him to hear the full weight of the words he had prepared. "Our marriage has not been a happy one for a very long time." "No," she said quietly. "It has not." His jaw tightened. "We have lived as strangers. We became strangers because you preferred distance to honesty." Victoria turned slightly from the window, though her expression remained carefully. Sebastian took a deep breath. "I didn't come here to exchange blame." "Then why did you come?" The question was spoken without bitterness, and for the first time that evening, he looked away. "I intend to seek a divorce." The fire crackled behind him. Evelyn had imagined this moment before, usually during the long nights when she could hear the wind moving through the chimneys and knew her husband was sleeping under another roof. In those private imaginings, she had cried. She had argued. She had reminded him of every promise he had made at the altar. But now that the words had finally been spoken, all she felt was a strange and perfect clarity. She looked toward Victoria, and Lady Victoria. Sebastian did not answer immediately. Victoria lowered her eyes with an elegance that might have been mistaken for modesty. That silence told Evelyn everything. "If that is your decision," she said, "I will not make it harder." Sebastian stared at her. "You agree?" "I accept that a marriage cannot be maintained by one person alone." For a brief moment, something crossed his face. Not relief. Something closer to offense. He had prepared himself to resist her grief but not to face her dignity. Victoria stepped nearer. This cannot be easy for any of us. Evelyn looked at her. No. But I suspect it will be easier for some than for others. Victoria's smile did not disappear. Though it became slightly more careful, Sebastian moved away from the fireplace. My solicitor will arrive tomorrow. We can begin arranging the terms. There are several estate matters that must be completed before I leave. His expression changed at once. What matters? The wintergrain contracts. Repairs to the eastern cottages, the school accounts. 2 medical grants awaiting approval. Sebastian frowned. Those matters can be handled by the steward. They cannot. Why not? Because the necessary documents are required. Signature. Victoria spoke gently. Perhaps Sebastian. Her Grace has simply grown accustomed to carrying responsibilities that should have stayed with you. The words sounded sympathetic. Evelyn heard the blade beneath them. Before Sebastian could respond, the butler entered and announced the arrival of Mr. Collins. The family solicitor, who had come earlier than expected, carried a leather case into the room and bowed. Your Grace. Your Grace, Lady Victoria. Sebastian wasted no time. You have been informed of my intentions. I have. Then prepare whatever is necessary. Mr. Collins placed the case on the table but did not open it. There is a preliminary matter. Sebastian's impatience showed. What matter? Before any separation agreement can be completed, all outstanding business connected to Ashford Estate must be reviewed and approved by Her Grace. Sebastian stared at him. My estate requires my wife's approval. Mr. Collins met his gaze without hesitation. It always has. The following morning, Sebastian entered the estate office and found 3 desks covered in ledgers, contracts, tenant requests, and sealed correspondence. Nearly every document bore the same small note. Awaiting the Duchess's signature, he turned to the butler standing near the door. Since when has every decision in this house depended upon Evelyn? The old man's expression remained respectful. Long before your Grace ever noticed. The following morning, Ashford Manor woke earlier than usual. Servants hurried through the corridors carrying ledgers, sealed letters, and bundles of contracts. Outside, wagons waited in the courtyard, ready to deliver grain before the first heavy frost arrived. The estate seemed to move with practiced precision, yet Sebastian could not ignore one unsettling detail. Every important decision had paused the moment Evelyn set down her pen. He stood beside the library window, watching the staff cross the courtyard. Where is Her Grace? He asked. The butler answered quietly. In the estate office, Your Grace. Sebastian frowned. At this hour? She has worked there every morning for many years. Those words stayed with him long. After the butler left. For years, he had believed Evelyn spent her mornings reading, receiving callers, or attending charitable teas with neighboring ladies. He had never imagined she began each day surrounded by contracts and account books. Victoria entered the room carrying a cup of tea. You hardly touched your breakfast. I have been thinking. She smiled gently. I can see that. Sebastian glanced toward the window again. I intend to inspect the estate myself. I think that would reassure everyone, Victoria replied. A duke should always know how his land is managed. Her answer sounded perfectly reasonable. Yet she carefully avoided mentioning Evelyn. Their first stop was the village school standing near the meadow. The small stone building looked modest, but every window had recently been repaired. Children's laughter drifted into the cool morning air as a young teacher welcomed them inside. The moment the villagers recognized Sebastian, they bowed respectfully. It is an honor to receive Your Grace. Sebastian nodded. I wish to see how the school has fared. The teacher smiled. We have been fortunate. In what way? There has never been a winter when we were forced to close. Sebastian looked around the classroom. The desks were sturdy. The books appeared new. Even the fireplace had recently been rebuilt. Who paid for all this? He asked. The teacher exchanged a brief glance with an elderly groundskeeper. We have always had a generous benefactor. A member of the parish? No, Your Grace. Then who? The teacher hesitated before answering. I was never told to speak of names. Sebastian waited for more. None came. As they walked back toward the carriage, Victoria folded her gloves neatly into her lap. Villages often create stories around wealthy patrons, she said. People enjoy believing someone is quietly watching over them. Sebastian gave a small nod, though the explanation did not satisfy him. Nothing about the teacher's expression had suggested a legend. It had looked like gratitude. Their next destination was a small hospital built beside the river. Unlike many country infirmaries Sebastian had visited over the years, this one showed none of the usual signs of neglect. Fresh herbs dried beneath the windows, the wards were clean, and every bed was occupied by patients receiving proper care. The physician greeted the Duke warmly. "It is good to see your grace," Sebastian studied the building with growing curiosity. "This hospital seems remarkably well supplied." "We have been fortunate." He had heard those exact words once already that morning. "What do you mean by fortunate?" The physician smiled. "Whenever we feared we might close a ward, the funds somehow arrived." "And from whom?" "I cannot honestly answer that." "You never asked." "The instructions were always clear." "What instructions?" The physician paused. "To spend the money wisely." Sebastian thanked him, though his thoughts were no longer on the patients. Twice in a single morning, he had encountered people whose lives depended on an unknown benefactor. Twice, no one would reveal a name. Instead of returning to the manor, Sebastian ordered the carriage toward the western farms. Golden fields stretched across the valley, interrupted only by rows of stone cottages and old oak trees. Harvest workers stopped to greet the Duke as he rode past, but what caught his attention was not the land. It was the records. Every foreman carried neatly organized account books. Every storage barn had recently been repaired. Every tenant seemed unusually confident about the coming winter. The estate manager met him outside the granary. "I hope everything meets your grace's expectations." Sebastian handed back one of the ledgers. These improvements must have cost a considerable sum. They did. When were they approved? Gradually. Over several years. By whom? The manager lowered his eyes respectfully. Every major investment was properly authorized. Sebastian's patience began to wear thin. "I asked who authorized them." The older man remained silent for a moment. "I believe that question is better answered by the family solicitor." It was the third time someone had politely refused to explain. Sebastian climbed back into the carriage without another word. Victoria watched him carefully. "You seem disappointed." "I dislike mysteries." She rested a reassuring hand on his arm. "Then the solicitor will explain everything soon enough." Her voice remained calm, but inside she felt the first trace of unease. She had expected Sebastian to dismiss these details as ordinary estate business. Instead, he had begun asking questions she could not answer. That evening, Sebastian passed the estate office. On his way upstairs, the door stood slightly open. Inside, Evelyn sat alone beneath the glow of a single oil lamp. Ledgers surrounded her in careful stacks. Some were tied with ribbons while others remained open, beside neatly written notes. She moved through each document without hesitation, adding brief instructions before placing it into another pile. Her face looked tired. Not defeated. Simply tired. For a long moment, Sebastian remained outside the doorway without speaking. He suddenly realized that he had never once asked what occupied her days while he spent his time in London. To him, she had always been simply the Duchess of Ashford. Now he found himself wondering whether she had quietly become something far greater. He turned away before she noticed him. That night, sleep refused to come easily. The same question echoed through his thoughts again and again. If Evelyn had truly done so little all these years, why did everyone seem unwilling to continue without her? 3 days later, the morning of divorce arrived beneath a sky the color of polished steel. Ashford Manor had never seemed so quiet. The servants moved through the corridors with unusual care, speaking only when necessary. Everyone understood that by sunset the house would no longer have a duchess. Sebastian stood alone in the library, staring at the gardens outside the tall windows. Autumn had stripped nearly every tree bare, leaving only scattered leaves drifting across the lawns. He had imagined this day many times. He expected to feel relieved. Instead, an unfamiliar weight settled over him. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Mr. Collins entered, carrying several leather folders and one wooden case. "Everything is ready, Your Grace." Sebastian nodded. "Where is Evelyn?" Her Grace is speaking with the steward. She wished to finish several instructions before today's meeting. Even now, even on the day their marriage would officially end. She was still thinking about the estate. A few minutes later, Evelyn entered the library. She wore a simple dark green traveling dress instead of morning black. No jewels rested around her neck except the wedding ring she would soon remove. Her expression remained calm, though the sleeplessness beneath her eyes could no longer be hidden. Victoria arrived shortly afterward. She greeted everyone with perfect courtesy before taking her place beside Sebastian. The room fell silent. Mr. Collins opened the wooden case. Before the divorce agreement is signed, there is one final legal matter that must be addressed. Sebastian folded his arms. I assume this concerns the estate. It does. The solicitor unfolded several aged documents whose parchment had yellowed with time. The first document is the marriage settlement signed 12 years ago. Sebastian barely glanced at it. I remember signing it. I wonder whether your Grace remembers reading it. Sebastian's confidence faltered. In truth, I relied upon my father's solicitor. Mr. Collins gave a respectful nod. As many young noblemen do. He carefully laid another document beside the first. This is Ashford Estate's financial report from the year before your marriage. Sebastian looked down. The figures surprised him immediately. Losses. Outstanding debts. Mortgages. Loans secured against farmland. He frowned. There must be some mistake. There is none. Ashford Estate was never in danger. Mr. Collins met his eyes. It was within months of bankruptcy. Silence settled over the room. Sebastian looked from one page to another, unable to reconcile the numbers with the prosperous estate he had inherited. How could I never have known? Because His Grace, your late father, believed the situation would recover. It didn't. No. Mr. Collins opened another folder. It survived because Lord Harrington intervened. Sebastian looked toward Evelyn. Her father. He purchased the outstanding debts. Mr. Collins continued before anyone could speak. He invested heavily in the farms, the mills, the roads, and the surrounding properties. Those investments became part of Lady Evelyn's marriage settlement. Another document slid across the table. This agreement states that every asset rebuilt or purchased with Lord Harrington's investment would remain the legal property of his daughter. Sebastian felt the room grow strangely still. He looked again at the estate map spread across the table. Large sections had been marked in blue ink: the western farms, the wool mill, the northern orchards, the village school, the hospital, the tenant cottages. One by one, Mr. Collins identified each property, all restored through Lady Evelyn's investment. Sebastian's voice had become almost inaudible. How much? Mr. Collins answered gently. Most of Ashford Estate's productive wealth. The words struck harder than any accusation. For years, he had believed those lands belonged to generations of Ashfords. In reality, they existed because another family had chosen to save his own. He slowly turned toward Evelyn. You never told me. She looked at him quietly. You never asked. There was no anger in her voice, only truth. Sebastian searched his memory. He remembered hunting parties, political dinners, London seasons, business trips. He could not remember a single evening when he had sat beside his wife and asked how the estate continued to prosper. The realization hurt far more than the legal documents before him. Victoria broke the silence. This cannot be the whole story. Mr. Collins looked at her politely. It is. There must be grounds to challenge such an agreement. There are none. Surely 12 years changes matters. The contract remains entirely valid. Victoria stepped closer to the table. Then the Duke should petition the Crown. Mr. Collins calmly shook his head. The Crown cannot overturn a lawful marriage settlement freely signed by both families. She refused to surrender. There must be another interpretation. There is not. Her composure finally cracked. If Lady Evelyn truly loved Ashford, why would she leave with so much? The question echoed through the room. Evelyn did not answer. She did not need to. Sebastian looked slowly around the library. He remembered the school, the hospital, the repaired cottages, the harvest records. Every improvement he had admired during the past week suddenly formed one complete picture. She had never taken from Ashford. She had spent 12 years giving to it. Victoria's voice softened again, though urgency lingered. Sebastian, you cannot simply accept this. He turned toward her. For 12 years, his words came slowly, I believed I had built this estate. No one interrupted. I believed I had been generous. His eyes fell upon the moor. The truth is, he paused, I never even knew who was carrying it. Across the table, Evelyn quietly removed her wedding ring. She placed it beside the divorce papers without looking at anyone. Mr. Collins slid the agreement toward her. When you are ready, Your Grace. She picked up the pen. Her signature appeared with the same steady handwriting that had approved countless contracts over the years. Then she set the pen down. Mr. Collins placed the document before Sebastian. The Duke stared at the empty line waiting for his name. For the first time in his life, signing his own name did not feel like exercising authority. It felt like acknowledging a truth he should have discovered years ago. After a long silence, he signed. The marriage ended with the stroke of a pen. But as the ink dried upon the page, Sebastian realized something far more painful. He had not lost his fortune that day. He had lost the only person who had quietly protected it all along. When Evelyn's carriage disappeared beyond the iron gates of Ashford Manor, no one spoke. The servants simply watched until the sound of the wheels faded into the distance. One by one, they returned to their duties, yet the house felt different. Not quieter, emptier. Sebastian remained standing in the entrance hall long after everyone else had left. 4 years, he had believed the manor was the heart of Ashford Estate. Only now did he understand that its heart had just driven away. The first week after the divorce was filled with endless decisions. Letters arrived every morning. Tenants requested repairs. Teachers needed funding. Doctors submitted accounts. Mill owners asked for approval before purchasing grain. Each document carried a note explaining how Lady Evelyn had handled similar matters in previous years. Sebastian signed what he understood. The rest he returned with questions. For the first time since inheriting title, he realized that managing an estate required far more than attending Parliament or hosting noble dinners. It required patience. It required judgment. Above all, it required remembering the people whose names never appeared. Society newspapers. Late one evening, he entered the estate office searching for an old survey map. The room had already been cleared. Most of Evelyn's belongings were gone. Only a small wooden drawer remained locked beneath the desk. The steward approached quietly. Her Grace asked that this be given to you after she departed. He placed a small brass key on the table. Sebastian hesitated before unlocking the drawer. Inside rested a single leather notebook. Nothing else. Its cover had faded with age and its corners were worn from years of use. He opened the first page. There were no financial records. No legal agreements. Only names. Mrs. Collins's medicine should arrive before Thursday. Replace little Thomas's boots before winter begins. Mrs. Edwards will never ask for help. Send coal anonymously. Sebastian slowly turned another page. Repair the church roof after the harvest so the workers are paid first. Another. Increase the school budget. 3 more girls have begun attending lessons. Another. The widow in Willow Lane pretends she has enough bread. She does not. Every page looked the same. Small reminders. Quiet kindnesses. Simple acts that no newspaper would ever report. He kept reading until he reached the final pages. There, written in the same careful handwriting, was one last note. Remind His Grace to wear a heavier coat before the first frost. He always insists he isn't cold. Sebastian stared at the sentence until the words became impossible to read. For 12 years, she had remembered everything. The estate, the tenants, the servants. Even him. He closed the notebook and rested both hands upon it. No tears came. The pain settled somewhere much deeper than tears. At last, he whispered into the empty room, I never deserved you. Winter slowly surrendered to spring. Sebastian began visiting every corner of Ashford Estate. Without ceremony or escort. He listened more than he spoke. And children. Whenever someone thanked him for an improvement, the answer remained the same. Lady Evelyn planned this before she left. At first, he found those words painful. Later, they became a reminder. If he wished to honor Ashford's future, he first had to acknowledge its past. Little by little, the estate flourished once again. Not because Sebastian wished to erase his mistakes, but because he finally understood the responsibility his wife had carried alone for so many years. That spring, the county held its annual charity gala. Nearly every noble family attended. Lady Victoria entered the ballroom with effortless confidence, convinced that time had already buried the divorce. She noticed several guests whispering as Sebastian crossed the room. Smiling gracefully, she joined the conversation. "What a relief that everything has finally settled," she said. "I only regret that Lady Evelyn insisted upon taking so much with her." Several ladies exchanged uncertain glances. Victoria continued before anyone could respond. "I suppose wealth changes even the kindest people." The room grew unusually still. Sebastian slowly turned toward her. His voice remained calm. "No." Every conversation nearby stopped. He looked directly at Victoria. "Evelyn did not leave with my fortune." A long silence followed. "She left with what had always been hers." No one moved. No one even reached for a glass. Sebastian continued. "My family's title survived because her family's generosity saved Ashford Estate. The farms, the school, the hospital, the mills, they still stand because of Evelyn." His gaze swept across the ballroom. "I spent years believing I had protected this estate. The truth is, it was my wife who protected all of us." Victoria's smile finally disappeared. "You cannot truly believe that." Sebastian answered without raising his voice. "I no longer believe. I know." He paused only a moment. "The only person who ever took something that did not belong to him was me." No accusation could have spoken more honestly. Victoria lowered her eyes. For the first time since entering Ashford Manor, she had nothing left to say. She quietly left the ballroom. No one followed. Several weeks later, Sebastian visited the village school on a clear spring morning. Children laughed beneath the great oak tree as their teacher dismissed the morning lessons. The building looked brighter than he remembered. Near the entrance stood a newly polished bronze plaque. Sebastian stepped closer. It read, "Ashford Village School. Restored through the generosity of Lady Evelyn Harrington Ashford, whose kindness gave generations of children a future." He stood there without speaking. The headmaster approached after a few moments. "We have been considering adding another name beneath Lady Evelyn's." Sebastian looked at him. The Duke, Sebastian, gently shook his head. "No." The headmaster seemed surprised. "Are you certain?" Sebastian smiled for the first time in many months. "She built this. My task is simply to protect it." The old teacher nodded with quiet understanding. As Sebastian walked back toward his carriage, the laughter of children echoed behind him. He did not look back. Some people leave a house. Others leave a legacy. Evelyn had left both. And Sebastian finally understood that redemption could change a man. But it could never return the life he had been too blind to cherish.